Okay.
It's August 2nd, 2024. Is that close enough for me?
Yeah.
August 2nd, 2024. I'm with Mr. John J. Jeckovich, decorated World War II veteran, and we're reading his book, Their Mother's Sons. We're on chapter 13, page 360. By the way, there's about 900 pages to this book. Mr. Jeckovich wrote it about 25 years ago, and it goes all the way from his kindergarten days to his retirement. And this chapter is titled Renee, Tripe, and Etampes. Mr. Jeckovich, you have your dog tag?
42965.
All right. Did you want me to read the book today, or you want to read it?
No, go ahead, read it, Dave. Go ahead.
You're looking chipper today.
All right, thank you.
You're looking well. How are you feeling?
Very good.
All right. That's what I like to hear. Here we go. Tomorrow, may I see you? Tomorrow, I murmured. She smiled and said, yes, but no tripe soup. You're doing very well with your injured English, I stated, taking hold of your hand. She smiled that infectious smile and thrust her manicured finger into my chest. You are teaching me, she stammered, her lips pouting invitingly as she spoke. Got to go, I blurted out as I was in her arms, hugged her tightly and kissed her. She put her arms around my neck and whispered in my ear, tomorrow. I nodded and kissed her once again and then let her go. As I walked a short distance into the park, I turned and Renee was still standing there. I waved and she waved in return. In a few minutes, I made the turn in the lake toward the hospital and she was out of sight. I reached the hospital just before the 1700 hours, and a lieutenant on duty stated she was worried that something had happened to me. It was getting late. I replied that I lost track of time and that I wandered further than I should have. She cautioned me to be careful as there was a great deal of black marketing going on in Paris, both French and American, looking for wristwatches, combat boots, and military clothing. What exactly do you mean by the black market?
Black market, they were stealing stuff and selling it on the black market.
To sell to other GIs?
Sell to GI, sell to civilians, anybody.
Were you approached to buy anything?
Oh, yeah.
Did you ever thought that you're at risk of stealing your stuff?
My stuff?
Yeah, were you at risk of your stuff being stolen?
Well, I wouldn't buy their stuff, no.
No. Huh? When you were in Paris, did you ever think someone was going to steal something from you? Like your watch or something like that? Did you think anyone was going to come up to you and steal your belongings?
Out of my pocket?
Yeah.
Well, not then, but now today I think they would.
So yeah. You felt safer in the criminal streets of Paris than you would be today. That's interesting. Wow, that's interesting. The sign of the times.
Times have changed.
The sign of the times. Okay. She cautioned me to be careful as there was a great deal of black market going on in Paris, both the French and the Americans, looking for wristwatches, combat boots, and military clothing. I thanked her for the word of caution, went up to my ward, and washed up for chow. The ward took on a different hue and complexion after being with Renee the better part of the day. It looked so sterile and impersonal, and on a second glance it was almost empty. As most of the beds were turned up, I asked the staff sergeant at the far end of the ward where everyone has gone. He stated, He stated that quite a few shipped out this morning, but they're expecting another train load late tonight. He suggested I check the bulletin board for any news of my departure, something I had not done these past few days. I went down to the first floor to where the bulletin board was located, next to the orderly room. What was posted was in the morning shipping orders. Most on the list were going to UK, England, as they were classified at Category 3. And more seriously wounded, or those with complications, there would be no more notices posted until tomorrow morning after breakfast. After chow that night, I spent some time in the day room, but still decided against writing any letters. I read a while, but found that I could not concentrate on what I was reading. H.G. Wells' Outline of History. I kept on thinking of Renee, her beauty, and my desire to be with her, and even more. I also thought about all the German portraits and paintings throughout Renee's apartment. Was I but one of the long line of conquests she had conquered, only to be painted and set upon the wall as another trophy? That's funny. The lieutenant was right. I must be careful. One does not really know what is out there. I sat there for a while, thinking how Renee looked and hoping that they would not ship me back for another week or so. I got into bed before lights out, and a little while later the medical team came by for our shots. The pretty blonde nurse remarked that this would be my last shot since I was off all treatments as of 2,400 hours. That meant one thing and one thing only. I was going to return to combat and my outfit very shortly. Very shortly. I was greatly disappointed at hearing that news, and I probably would not see Renee again, and it disturbed me immensely. The ward was usually quiet, and it made it much more eerie than ever before. I suddenly decided that I did not want to be here anymore. The warmth and safety of this environment was too stabilizing. This was not the real life that I had come to know these past few months. I felt if I was marking time in some far-off place as an invalid who had to be catered to, helping along the way, generally looked after and checked on a regular basis. The real world was where Renee was, and even still where I had come from. Wiltz, Bastogne, Lape, Fink, Ellis, Anne, Jean, father, mother, brother, sister. This was where the life was being played out, not in some privileged sanctuary. I tossed and turned all night, causing the night nurse to be at my bedside numerous times. The next morning I was up earlier than usual, even before it was light outside. I got dressed and strolled around the courtyard, my mind wandering from another thought to another. I did not know what triggered off my sullenness, but I knew that I would have to get a grasp on it and resolve it. I ate some breakfast and started to leave the dining hall when the night nurse approached me and said I was reported to the dispensary immediately. I knew what that was for. She had reported my fitful night, and they were going to questioned me about it. The major ushered me into the little cubicle and started to ask some probing questions. I answered them as truthfully as I could. There were several things on my mind. I was having some difficulty sorting them out. I replied calmly. He fumbled with a stack of papers on his desk and then asked in an unusual manner, would they have anything to do with you reporting back to active duty in several weeks? I knew right away what he was getting at. Was I sick at the thought of going back up on the line? Sure. I was hesitant and had a pit in my stomach uneasiness, knowing full well that the odds stacked against me on the second time around. But that was not the reason. The real reason was my despondency. Suddenly it came to me and I revealed partially to the major. I met a girl in town and I'm having a difficult time breaking it off, I muttered convincingly. The major smiled and said, son, you're young, that's part of growing up. With that, he slapped me on my sore shoulder. I winced at the blow, and he quickly apologized and smiled as he recorded his findings on my record. Do you want to see what I've written on your chart? He remarked smilingly. I peered at the chart as he held it up. He scrawled out in typical physician penmanship, patience is love, fit for duty.
Say that again, patient is what?
Patient is in love, fit for duty. That means you're going back to combat.
Yeah.
Fit for duty. Wow. Did you still have bandages on?
Yeah.
When they sent you back to combat, did you still have bandages?
Well, I had a bandage on my arm and on my leg, yeah.
Oh, wow. How was your walk? Were you able to walk?
Yeah, well, I could walk, but I didn't walk, they wouldn't let me go.
I smiled as he excused me from further interrogation. I felt better. The last thing I wanted to go through was a bunch of psychiatric doctors giving me a bunch of ink blot tests and asking me all kinds of obtuse questions about my childhood and family. I was correct in my evaluation to the major. I was having a difficult time reconciling my feelings towards Renee. I did not expect another romantic interlude so close to this one I experienced in Haverford West. I was beginning to see myself as some kind of monster preying on the emotions of innocent women. I did not see myself as a womanizer or even a ladies' man, but only a lonely GI seeking some companionship and sociableness. I did not regret any of it, but enjoyed every bit of time I was fortunate to have with Anne and Jean. Now I was getting involved with Renee, and I recalled the major's remarks. I was young, and that was a part of growing up. Minutes?
Yeah.
16.
I felt better and went to the orderly room to get my pass and check the bulletin board. The young lieutenant signed me out and stated I better check the bulletin board as there was a large shipment going out tomorrow. My suspicions were confirmed. I was on the shipping list. Wow. You were on the shipping list.
Yeah.
I was being transferred to a convalescent hospital in Etampes, 30 miles south of Paris. Etampes was my final destination before replacements center. I was glad for the transfer. The hospital setting was becoming dreary and drab, and I guess I wanted to change. From what I heard of the convalescent hospital, they were akin to R&R, rest and rehabilitation, furlough, only better. I followed Renee's direction and met her up at St. Michel's Way, and then picked up a pedestrian complex in Rue St. Andres until I reached the crossroads of Carrefour de Bussy. At the end of the street, one of the small side streets that radiates out of the Carrefour de Bussy, I had broken the street sign on it. It was a particular street that Renee lived on. I arrived at their place in less than an hour, and I consider myself fortunate in finding it so quickly. I did not know if I should knock using the large brass knocker on the oak indoor, or just tap on the door with my knuckles. My dilemma was resolved before I did either.
Yeah, but there's several things.
Renee opened the door, smiling brightly, saying bonjour fervently several times. I was joyed to see her once again. She looked ravishing and much more dressed up than yesterday. She was wearing a short red skirt that showed off her enchanting legs and knees, and a white short-sleeved blouse that accented her lovely figure. Her hair was differently but exquisitely displayed, as the only female was capable of doing, as only the French female were capable of doing. She put her arms around my neck and kissed me tenderly on the cheek. The closeness of her body made me more conscious of my tremendous attraction I felt for her. Her sprightliness was intoxicating and exhilarating, and always lifted up my experience to an unprecedented height. Renee took my hand and led me into the parlor. Crossing her legs, sat next to me. I put my arm around her shoulder, and I could see the softness of her hair as it touched my arm. She turned to me slightly, stated that she had been practicing her English, and asked if I could understand her better. I replied in an answer to her question that I could in more ways than she could possibly think of. She seemed befuddled by my answer. I laughed, reached over, kissed her, and said, "Yes, yes, I understand you." She was pleased with my answer and put her hand on my shoulder and took my other hand. Her nails were colored a brighter red than I have seen before, and I remarked about them. I took her hand into my lips and began kissing each finger repeatedly. Beautiful, beautiful, until she understood. She arose from the couch, putting on her short leather jacket, and exclaimed, "We must be off." I said questioningly, "Where?" She only smiled, taking my hand, and led me out to the front door to the nearest corner, where we caught a trolley heading in the heart of Paris. Was the trolleys electrified?
No, wires on top, no, they were gas.
Gas-powered trolleys. I'll be damned. The trolley was nearly empty. As we sat together, she pointed out some attractions of Paris. As she would move about pointing to various attractions, her short skirt would rise even more, and I was more enraptured with that sight than anything Renee was showing me on the outside.
10 minutes.
We finally stopped at the intersection. She took my hand and alighted the trolley. We walked a short distance, almost to the center of the block, and came to a quaint, inviting cafe. The sign over the front windows read, "Chez Taoun," As we entered, the sound of a quartet playing soft music greeted us. The maitre d' welcomed us with a smile, bowed graciously, and escorted us to our table. It was all very formal, and I felt a little self-conscious in my enlisted man's uniform. Was there many other military men in the cafe?
No.
You were it? You were the only military?
Yeah.
Okay. Renee seemed completely at ease with the entire surroundings as she spoke to our waiter. She was discussing the menu and she would emphasize her meeting with her hands, gesturing over so eloquently. Every now and then she would glance at me while the waiter was discussing something on the menu. And then she'd turn away and start another discourse with him. I found this side of her fascinating and a little bewildering. I was discovering that she had many facets to her personality, all intertwined into one central theme, of which I knew very little. She appeared to be at times chaste and pure, and most certainly unpretentious and unassuming most of the time, at least how she was as she appeared to me. But after viewing all those portraits and drawings of German tanks and soldiers, I did not know what to think. The waiter brought us a bottle of wine and poured some in my glasses. Renee wanted to make a toast to our lasting friendship, and it may never end. Just then I thought of my transfer to Etampes and wondered when I should tell her. The meal was superb. Even though I did not know what I was eating most of the time, Renee mentioned gizzard, salad, salmon, endive, and pullets and herb. But it was all strange to me, and I relied on only one criteria: how it tasted and looked. The meal was superb. Renee said perfectly at ease in this environment. I found a little different to compare to her with which I got to know her at the park at her modest home. There were no military people about, just French civilians. That made me uneasy. Why would the French civilians in that cafe make you uneasy?
What?
Why would the French civilians in that cafe make you uneasy?
Well, they didn't know how the French took the U.S. military,
You don't know how they
how they react.
to an American soldier.
Yeah.
Okay. It made me uneasy also. I thought of what the lieutenant had told me this morning, and I immediately dismissed my apprehension and enjoyed my time with Renee. I insisted on paying for the dinner and a gratuity, even though Renee was persistent, saying she invited me. I finally convinced her, and she reluctantly gave in, smiling as she did. We left the cafe and walked for a while, chit-chatting about many things, and mostly about the war and when it would end. It was after 1,500 hours, and we're both conscious of my 1,700-hour silence. After walking to the end of the block, we got a trolley to take us back to her place. She immediately took me upstairs to her studio and said matter-of-factly she wanted to paint my portrait. I asked her if she meant right now. She smiled and exclaimed she meant later in the week, and that would take several days. It was then I told her I transferred to Etampes. She was disappointed, but said jubilantly, "That is not far from here. Only a half-hour train ride. The paintings of Weimar and the Tiger tanks maybe uneasy. She must have felt my uneasiness, for she took my hand and led me back downstairs to the parlor. We sat next to each other. I took her hand and thanked her for an eventful dinner and the presence of her company. She turned her face towards me, smiled, and kissed me. "Well, when will I see you again?" she whispered, releasing her hand from mine, laying her head on my shoulder. The fragrance of her hair and her firm breast heaving slightly against my arm dispelled any misgiving or trepidation I might have regarding her past. Not thinking of what I was saying, so completely engrossed in my thoughts, I replied, "Probably the day after tomorrow would be the earliest." She was a little disquieted by the remark and stammered, "I'll wait for you here all day at home and the day after tomorrow." Then got up from the couch. I looked at her, stood there, and I could see that she was visibly disturbed about my transfer. Also, I knew that she was aware that our time together was coming to an end. I got up as it was time to go and took her in my arms and kissed her. As I held her, I thought brought her closer to my body. I could feel her breast against my chest. She put her arms around my neck and laced her fingers through my hair. We stood there in each other's embrace. I slid my hand. No. I got back to the hospital. Minutes?
2 minutes and 50 seconds.
I got back to the hospital a little before 1700 hours, and after signing in, went to the bulletin board for more news and our departure to Etampes the next morning. There was an update, a precursor of things to come. We were to be in Class A uniforms, ODs, field jackets, and overseas cap, and to fall out at 8:30 hours. Transportation would be provided by 6x6s, and they would be covered. Estimated travel time, 1 hour.
There you go.
1 hour, 6x6s. It's a hell of a bumpy ride, No more ambulance, so you're not going in an ambulance, you're not getting first class treatment. You're going in a 6x6.
Yeah.
Bandages and all. Every pothole, every bump, every dirt road, every
Yeah.
snow, you're gonna feel it now. No more ambulance ride, no more special privileges, and certainly no more white sheets or pillows.
1 minute, 44 seconds.
We were being reverted to strictly Army SOP, standard operating procedures. It meant only one thing, our days were numbered. We would be back in combat shortly. After chow, I wrote one short letter back home, saying a little bit about the hospital stay and not mentioning anything about going back up. I told them I would write again in several days, since I was moving about a great deal. Outside of that, everything was fine. Minutes?
We're just winding it down to 1 minute now.
I did not write to Ann or Jean, primarily because I did not know what to write them. Nothing had changed in our situation, and I did not want to go over all the old ground that I've covered a dozen times before. There was nothing new to discuss. I was still ambivalent about my future, and I felt there would be nothing resolved in my writing. I thought it would be best they planned for their futures without me, and perhaps they would attain what they are seeking without me, being in the way to hamper them. It never occurred to me that they would presume something befell me, and that was the reason they received no communications from me. I felt as if I reasoned all along, and that'd be best that I not write. Minutes.
Yep, 13 seconds and he's on his way.
Best you not write. He's on
Yeah.
6x6s. No more special treatment. Headed to Etampes.